Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and also we say welcome to a number of people we know who didn't want to get out of their pajamas too early and are therefore actually watching. Oh, and I'm getting an echo back. Give me a minute. Right. Getting an echo back. Give me a minute. Fine. I know they always say you should never start a meeting with an apology, but we're going to have to, because you're going to have to listen very closely, because unfortunately we forgot to bring another speaker with us today, and that we'd have had to have paid about £1 million to hire one church house. That projector would cost us £140 plus VAT if someone hadn't kindly loaned us one. I'm afraid you may have to listen quietly, and I do apologise for that. Martin will be quickly writing subtitles on a piece of paper and holding them up, which is his penance. So to everybody else out there this morning, welcome and thank you for coming today. This morning we wanted to talk briefly, we've only got about 45 minutes online here, about learning from the Wilkinson report, and meeting is in two halves. The first half of the meeting is live here in Church House, and 8:45 we'll be breaking the connection here, but the meeting will be continuing till about 9:30. So if you have YouTube on your mobile phones, you can actually watch the rest of the meeting as well. It's all right. Someone has just sent me a message. No, it's fine. We're delighted actually this morning to welcome 4 guests for the first half of the meeting. And for the first half, our old and former colleague, Gavin Drake. Gavin, good morning and welcome back to General Synod. You thought you got away with it safely, but you haven't. My colleagues all see this in a different order, but welcome also to Jane Chavou, who is in the bottom right of our screen. Jane, you were with us last night. Thank you very much indeed in coming back and getting up at this awful hour to join us this morning and to give us a perspective from the point of view of survivors. And we're also pleased to welcome David Lucas, who is effectively the other part of the technical group, because David is up in Jarrow and is also driving this for us. So if we get cut off here, Dave, you're in charge. So get your guitar, play him a few songs, and we'll get reconnected as quickly as we can. But it means that there will be no disconnections if anything goes wrong with the Wi-Fi, or more likely my computer, while we're doing this. Now, I'm going to invite each of you just to say good morning so people can understand how not noisy, I'm afraid, this is going to be, to explain why you have a problem. If anyone has a hearing issue, please come to the front. I will just say, by the way, you are not being recorded. You are not being videoed. If you wish to say anything on screen, you come and stand here and then you're on. If you come and stand here, you can't be seen, and you're welcome to adopt either of those two positions if you would like to. We can't guarantee. Oh, don't. Well, you're going to see me do my gymnastics in a while because I fall over everything. We can't guarantee you this is a safe space because, of course, it is being broadcast live on YouTube and it's being recorded to YouTube. So we weren't planning anyone should tell personal stories this morning. We would ask you to protect yourselves, and we just stick to the report. If you want to say something, feel free, but understand that we don't know how many people may be watching it out there. For members of our YouTube watching group this morning, good morning, and thank you for joining us at this terrible hour. If you're on YouTube, you should find that the comments and questions slot is open on the screen, which I can see on my monitor down there. If you put questions or comments in, then we will share them with our panel and invite them to comment as well. So do please feel free to. But also remember that your comments and questions are also recorded by YouTube, which means when someone watches this back, they can actually listen to and watch, not listen to, watch everything that you've put in. Just to assure our YouTube viewers, we are not monitoring in any way who is connected to this meeting. We have no idea who you are. We have no idea where you are. So you are completely anonymous when you're with us today, but thank you anyway for your patience. And if you're sitting in one of the hotels having breakfast, well, you're doing better than us, and we wish you a very bon appetit. That's enough, I think, for the opening. So I'm going to hand over now to my co-host, Martin Sewell, who's going to have to watch that thingy. And I'm going to start monitoring what's coming in. Or someone says about Martin, get off. But I'm sorry about that.
Good to see you all. Let's crack on. The Wilkinson report is hugely important. It's a brilliant piece of work. Sarah Wilkinson was not allowed to say who was responsible, but what she has very cunningly done is to lay it out there all in plain sight. And anyone who reads this report can have no doubt at all about where the buck stops. That is not always apparent in the Church of England, but thank you, Dr. Wilkinson, from the bottom of our hearts. Now, I'm going to throw it open to our panel and say, would you like to kick us off with a few of your key takeaways? What really struck you about the Wilkinson report? And should we do Jane first? I'll start with Jane. Any thoughts?
Thank you, Martin, and good morning, everybody. I'll just go with two. So I think one of the key takeaways, the top key takeaway for me was this was entirely preventable. That there were some serious errors made which didn't need to be made. And that's quite shocking as one of the survivors, one of the many survivors who've been impacted and harmed by what happened, is to know that with just some thoughtful practice and some honesty and some transparency and some accountability, none of this harm needed to have taken place. And I think the second thing that she demonstrates really, really clearly is that it has been a safeguarding failure. You know, we know more now with the Glasgow report, but it's very clear from her report that the harm that was done, not just to the small group of survivors, the 12 who were directly engaging around particular reviews, but all the other survivors who were engaging about the ideas of reviews or contributing to the report that Jasvinder wrote, or who were watching and waiting, thinking, at last, here's an independent body that I can trust. And I think, you know, the report demonstrates why trust in safeguarding in the Church of England is at such a low level, and why whatever our concerns about implementation at the J report is now the only way to go. I'll stop there.
Okay, well, let's pass on. Dave, I'm going around the bottom of the screen here. Dave Lucas, it's good to see you. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I come at this from the point of view that we have quite a few survivors following what we do on Twitter. And it seems to me that the report highlights the lack of provision for survivors who no longer feel able to attend a physical church. And there seems to be no provision for them in terms of what replaces that attendance at a physical church. And I think the report is it points out that lack. That's all I'd want to say, really.
Well, Gavin, you've had a part to play, a lead part, I think, in many ways, in having highlighted and warned us. So what do you make of it?
Thank you. First of all, can I apologise to people in the room? I'm aware that there's a 2-second or so delay, so it looks as if I'm being dubbed badly.
Gavin, can we tell you, there's no delay in the room. The delay is only to YouTube, and they're seeing everything about 2 to 5 seconds late, but everyone else is seeing it in real time.
Perfect. I think I would echo what Jane has said, but I would go a little further. The Glasgow report, which is not what we're discussing about, but the Glasgow report highlights and shows the effect of the actions of the Archbishop's Council. What the Wilkinson report does is show that this was deliberate. It was deliberate because they were warned. The Archbishop's Council were told the effect of what they were doing. And let's break this down. It's not necessarily what they were doing. If the Archbishop's Council decided the ISB wasn't working and they wanted to replace it with something new, that was there within their remit because of the way they set it up. But how they abolished the ISB, with no warning to survivors, no care about the impact on survivors, no preparation between the ISB members and survivors in the Archbishop's Council to put in place a process that was a safe process, despite the warnings that the Archbishop's Council had through its secretary, William Nye, means that this was a deliberate act, and it can't be disguised in any other way that a deliberate decision was taken knowing the impact that this would have on survivors. And I think that is unforgivable.
Thank you, Gavin. I wonder perhaps this might be a time to offer it to the room. Has anybody here, would anybody like to come forward and offer a few thoughts as to what leapt off the page to you about Wilkinson? We've got plenty of ideas. You know what we think. Don't be bashful. Come forward, Roy. Thank you. Or not.
Yes, you're on the monitor here. You're not on the
Well, I'm
monitor.
not happy. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again, very briefly, I think the other thing that I wasn't aware of was the way that safeguarding issues in relation to people who weren't children or vulnerable adults were being treated under this same kind of measure. And so again, the fact that it was failing meant that there's a whole range of people who are not children and vulnerable adults who were also covered under this umbrella, and it was obviously clearly didn't suit them any better than it did to the vulnerable adults and the children. So that's very important, I think.
I wonder if I can throw to Jane a question. Can you give any idea how many survivors are we talking about that have been that are potentially out there who were affected by these decisions? Does anyone have any idea? Because I don't think it's knowable, but what order of magnitude are we talking about?
I think it's almost impossible to say, Martin, because there's no one place, there's no one umbrella that can bring all the survivors together. But I'm in touch with about 200. I think probably Maxas maybe about the same. I know there's another group of survivors who've been long engaging with the church, which I'm told is about 90. I think again there's about 200 on Yanis's survivor engagement list. So those that we know and I think again, was it about the same number that were in contact with Jasvinta for her reports about the survivors' experiences of church safeguarding? So we know there's hundreds, but they're only the ones who feel strong enough to come forward, you know, and identify themselves to each other or to safeguarding advocates or to safeguarding staff. So there will be many more. I think every survivor that I know, irrespective of whether they felt they had a case that might go to the ISB, was watching the ISB to see what happens. You know, and as we know that 1 in 10 people experience abuse, you could say 1 in 10 members of the church were impacted.
So, put it simply, allowing for overlaps, we're probably talking a minimum of 200.
Oh, definitely more than that, I would think. I mean, I know 200 personally. So,
Well,
and I'm not that important. Do you know what I mean? So there's going to be more than that.
Yes, you are, said he flatteringly. Okay, I want to move on a little bit. Amongst everybody here, did the report meet your expectations? Is this report what you thought we were going to get? Is it worse, better? What's your thoughts on that? Anybody here wanted to start? No? Yes, come forward.
Can we recommend you go to watch?
Sorry,
It's my fault.
I think what I would want to say is that it did absolutely meet the report, and I think meet my expectations. And I think that it was good in itself, but then when you compare it to the G report and to the legal advice that comes to the G report, it's even better, to be fair. So it's part of kind of the uncovering of something, if that makes sense. So yeah, I thought it was a brilliant report.
Anybody else? Any? I agree. We're here. Any other thoughts? Okay. On screen, Gavin, did it meet your expectations?
It went a lot further than my expectations. I didn't engage with the Wilkinson report. I looked at the terms of reference and thought this is another stitch up. I thought that the barrister Sarah Wilkinson would not be able to fully address what was going on. In particular, in the terms of reference that I was worried about was the termination of the timeline to the announcement, and a lot of damage and mismanagement went on after the announcement, in particular going into the July 23 synod. And the report from William Nye, which wasn't a report that we were unable to tack on a following motion to the refusal to allow Stephen Jasvinder to address the synod, and the shenanigans we had on that painful Sunday, and the press release issued by Church House, basically correcting the Archbishop of Canterbury's statement, and saying that the Archbishop of Canterbury was wrong, which the Wilkinson report says that press statement was wrong, and so I thought, I'm not going to engage. The cutoff is too early. The terms of reference are too narrow. But actually, Sarah Wilkinson has done a brilliant job in providing that forensic timeline analysis of what happened and when, and who knew what and when. And I think that was all credit to her to work within the terms of reference and still do that. I think was a brilliant piece of work.
Dave, do you want to put two? Oh, sorry. Well, let me just ask Dave, and then we'll call you in, Jane. Dave?
I'd just like to come back on when you were talking about the numbers. Okay, we can't put a definite number on it, but what we're not taking into account are the families and the friends of survivors. Yes.
Brilliant.
For every survivor, there's going to be half a dozen probably family, friends who are also affected by this. So the numbers are much bigger than just the individual survivors themselves.
Thank you for that. Jane, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of the expectation, I thought she did an excellent job within the terms that she had. Sort of echoing a bit what Gavin says, but I think we need to know that it did stop too early. The terms of reference meant that Jasvinder and Steve were unable to engage. So there is two very important voices missing in the reports, and it hasn't looked really properly at the impact, which continues. My review is now further back than it was on June the 21st to 2023. So, you know, the harm continues. And I think, although she obviously had to have a cut-off date, I think she should have been allowed, that she should have responded to, or she should have been allowed to respond to Stephen Jasvinder's request to amend the terms of reference so that they could be heard. But in the terms of what she did, I agree, it was an excellent report.
I think at a later stage, we will be engaging with the Sheepfold project. We will be engaging with Stephen Jasvinder to ask them why they didn't engage. But do remember that their professional reputations were on the line. And that's a very big reason. I don't blame them for being very cautious. But I was won over by Dr. Wilkinson. She gave me a lot of assurance, and that's why I engaged, and a number of you helped to join me. What a big surprise. Sorry, Gary?
Quickly jump in here just to develop a little what Jane said about the terms of reference and Stephen Jasvinder. To me, it is shocking that a review looking into the disbanding of a body, that the terms of reference can be set without any reference to the people who were disbanded. But this is typical of the way the Archbishop's Council draw up terms of reference for their reviews, their reports, and so on. They don't consult with the people affected as to what would make effective terms of reference, which means they control the narrative. And that has to stop. The Archbishop's Council need to be more open.
I have heard people use the word corruption. I mean, are we in those territories?
I think there is an element of corruption here because there's manipulation and there's lies going on. And when charity trustees who are accountable to the Charity Commission and others lie, and I think it has got to the stage where I'm quite happy to use that word lie, and I will say to the Archbishop's Council, if this is defamatory, sue me. I think the Archbishop's Council and its secretariat are lying, and we can see that in the report that William Nye produced for the Synod on the disbanding of the ISB, and then the presentation by the Archbishop's Council on the Sunday before Stephen Jasrinder spoke, and then what we hear in the Wilkinson report, they don't tie up. And the only explanation for that is lying, and when you've got official lying, that is corruption.
Clive, I know you're busy on the tech side, but could I just invite you in for one moment? You and I were very interested in the issue of whether the decision to close the ISB was unanimous. Would you like to deal with that point?
Yeah, certainly. And again, I think we're so grateful to Dr. Wilkinson and actually for her team, because she was supported by at least one evidence gatherer. And I've decided that when the police finally catch me, I want her to defend me in court. I'm delighted to say this in a public place. It felt like one of the best reports I have ever seen in terms of how the evidence was laid out, how thorough it was, and also how much information she obtained. Because there are certainly things in there I'm not entirely certain the world wanted to be published. In terms of the voting, for me, it was the second vote was the key one, because we find from Dr. Wilkinson's evidence that of 19 eligible votes, only 11 were cast in favour of closing down the ISB. The other 8 either did not vote or voted against. So you've basically got an 11-8 majority to do it. So it's clear that the opinions were divided at the Archbishop's Council about what to do. We don't know who were the individual votes, who abstained, and because it was done by post, we're saying abstained. I don't know, maybe they didn't get the email. We can't tell. But certainly it was not a unanimous vote. None of the votes were ever unanimous. There were always people who were concerned. There were voices of concern expressed on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, it was 11-8, and that was a decision that was taken. I'm going to take the opportunity just to mention, you will see some of us are wearing badges as we walk around today saying 565.4. And the reason we're doing that is that that's the paragraph in Dr. Wilkinson's report. If you look it up, that's the paragraph where the Archbishop's Council considered how they could close the ISB down in such a way that the members of the ISB wouldn't have a chance to come to General Synod and address us. And I don't know how Dr. Wilkinson got hold of that, but for me, that was the day they decided that we didn't matter. And it was actually, I'd read the report. I mean, Martin and I have read this report about between 12 and 18 times to get the films done. I read that paragraph the first time and my blood actually ran cold. It's like the audit moment where you see the big things. They did what? And it's the fact they would do that. And again, I know I've got Gavin, Dave, and Jane on screen. And I don't know if that paragraph sprang out to any of you, but the fact that the whole timing of the closure was done around the fact that we were heading to a General Synod, and that at General Synod, if they had been allowed to speak, they figured that the Synod members wouldn't allow them to be closed down. So we better get rid of them quick. And the 21st of June was the last mathematical date on which it could be closed down. And they would not be, ISB members would not be employees of the church on the day the General Synod opens. They would have no right of address to us. And that makes you worry a lot about the 57 minutes on the 21st of June and why it was done so quickly, because after that, they would have been able to come to us as General Synod, and seeing how everyone reacted on the 5th of July at that awful afternoon where people were clearly unhappy that Jazz and Steve couldn't address us, members obviously cared, and members of the Synod were very concerned. And that concern was effectively just wiped.
I wonder perhaps if I can move the discussion along there. Were there any other surprises? Anything that's really jumping off, or that you found that really impacted me? That finding was really important. Any thoughts on that? Okay, you don't have to. The other thing that Clive and I said was, many of you, I hope quite a lot of you have seen the Wilkinson Files videos. Clive and I, if you preach transparency and accountability, you've got to practice it. Does anyone think that we were unfair? Does anyone think that we did a thoroughly bad job? Not technically, because it was all very good. But are we misleading people on this? Is there anyone, can you tell us, hold us to account? That's what we want you to do, because we want to model this properly. Okay, well, anyone on screen, please feel free. Okay, well, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? We've got a debate coming up. What sort of response are you going to bring to this debate? And again, these are open questions. There's no, you may think, well, this is what's being proposed is the only way forward, or you may say, well, we like this bit, but we don't like that bit. You may have heard that I raised the question, what is plan B? Because supposing we say we don't like this G2336, we don't like it. Does that mean that everything goes into hibernation for 6 months? Is that the idea? Are we really being given what I call the bum's rush? You know, pass this or the kid gets it. You know, I don't understand the thinking. Well, I do understand the thinking, I fear, but there we are. I invite people to offer any thoughts as to how you're going to approach this debate. Yes.
Take on. Yeah, please do.
Well, I have to confess, I'm a bit confused. That can you explain to me what the difference between this debate we're having this morning and what's going to be going on tonight at the House of Laity?
Oh, no,
this is where I'm going to. Can you just explain that?
For the background to the viewers as well.
Well, yes, there are two quite important things going on. First of all, we're going to spend a lot of the day talking about safeguarding. I do worry if we've got the cart before the horse, because as I understood it, we're going to do paper 2336, and then we're going to debate Wilkinson and Jay. And I think that's just absurd. I mean, shouldn't we be debating that first and then decide what we're going to do about it? I don't want to pass a paper and then wish we hadn't because of what we've just discovered. That seems completely insane. And I'd like somebody else, could some of you please take that on, because they're going to hear enough from Clive and I, and we do need other people to make these points. There's a House of Laity meeting this afternoon. I'll do this tomorrow. Do this very briefly, where I've called it, and I've appealed to various people across the church in safeguarding the Save the Parish people, even the people who are unhappy about the way the legal advice was not disclosed in the same-sex marriage issues. And I've said to them, look, you're all mumbling in the coffee rooms that this is all unfair. Can we just get us together and say, well, what are we going to do about it? I don't say that I know the answer to that, but I think there ought to be a conversation. And so what I'm simply doing is bringing people together and starting that conversation, and we'll see where we go. So it's not strictly on Wilkinson, but it's not entirely separate from Wilkinson either. So that's what we're talking about there, Roy. Does that help? Is that clear? Anybody else as to responses? That's really what we're looking for. Are you shell-shocked? Not awake? Oh.
Can you come if you want to share it?
Quite loudly, if you would.
You either stand off camera, okay, you're welcome to, or you can be on camera, but then everyone can see you.
My concern with 2336 is a simple one. The group is being asked to bring back proposals. Here are the answers. Sorry, here is the answer, which is the Archbishop's Council marking its own homework. A very simple change would be for them to bring back reflections. Even if we can't, actually sink the boat, we might actually hold it below the waterline. The J report is a big report. It's very important. We got it 2 days ago. Now, it seems to me that the understanding of that report is going to be very partial for most of us. We've had other things to do, like living. And what I think happens with one of these reports is that understanding grows as all sorts of conversations, formal and informal, take place. As social media gets going, people go, have you read so-and-so and so-and-so? And does it look like so-and-so and so-and-so? But so if they were asked to bring back some reflections, and the main discussion on J doesn't take place until July, we may actually have a better understanding of what's going on than we are at the moment. It's all being rushed. Do we know why the J report was so late? Is it deliberate? I don't know.
I think, in fairness, I must leap to the defence of Archbishop's Council. It's a first. No, we must. Professor J was very clear. She told the church at the outset, I am going to control this process. You will not get a prior copy. I will release it when I am ready. So we can't go down a conspiracy line on that one. There's plenty of things they are responsible for. That isn't one of them. So let's get that clear. Okay. Is there anything, Jane, anything you would like somebody here to take into the debate?
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin. So there's several things. So firstly, the paper is conflating the issues of the Wilkinson report and what went wrong and who is responsible for that and what should be done to deal with the carnage that the closing of the ISB has created, with looking at what should be the future, what should replace the ISB. Those are two separate issues, and very to me, the first issue, which is hugely important for all of us who've been harmed, has been completely dismissed. I want Synod to hold people accountable for what happened, and I want Synod to ensure that the ISB 12, the ones directly impacted, that the Archbishop's Council engages with us to agree a way forward that we will have confidence in, because they still have failed to do that. And I want Synod to ensure that proper attention is paid to the safeguarding failures that have been evidenced from the Wilkinson report, and in fact now a subject of a core group investigation of the Archbishop's Council members. We are talking about a serious safeguarding failure. I want Synod to be saying something about that. And then secondly, then we're the future looking. I think, obviously the call for independence in the J report was no surprise, and I think has been generally welcomed, although how we achieve that independence is obviously still going to be a huge debate, and there are some concerns about her remarks around vulnerability and spiritual abuse amongst survivors. That's caused a lot of distress and fear. But those are details which we can work on. That the independence is the key thing. I want Synod to think about how is the process of deciding what that independent structure should look like going to happen. The response group that is suggested at the moment includes most of the same people who caused the problem with that have been identified in the Wilkinson report. So I want Synod to amend who's going to lead the response. And we need to note that Wilkinson recommended, and Jay also recommends, that this should be independent consultants. And I think it should be an independent chair. Yes, it has to include church stakeholders. Of course it does, because the church has got to be involved in legislation and in the payment. So the church should be at the table, but it needs to be led by someone with independent safeguarding expertise. And I hope Synod will settle for nothing less than that.
Yes, thank you, Jane. I think I would encapsulate it, if I may briefly, I'm going to call Gavin in, is that we're told we need a new culture. And so the very first thing they do is to say, we have decided that these are the right people to take us forward. Here it is. Please rubber stamp it. There is no debate. If that's the new culture, God help us. Anyway, carry on, Gavin.
Thank you. In question time last night, and I must apologise because I don't know what the question was. I don't know what the subject was. I was monitoring, but I was also being a house husband and doing 4 separate types of meals for the 4 separate children who won't eat the same thing. One of the archbishops, I think it was Archbishop Justin, was asked in a supplementary to do a review on something that had happened. And his response was, "We've already had the review. We don't need to do it again." And his answer jumped out, even though I missed what the question was that he was responding to, because that is the completely opposite approach to what they're doing here. What we are doing here is, or what the proposal from the Archbishop's Council is, that a group be set up to do a review, to do a consultation, and to come up with proposals. You've had that. Professor J has consulted. Professor J has reviewed. Professor J has come up with proposals. What needs to happen now is not a group to consult, review, and come up with proposals. What is needed now is a group to implement. And as Jane said, it's important that that group is independent and as recommended by Sarah Wilkinson and Alexis J. The proposal from the Archbishop's Council to Synod is to create 2 teams to play football and to kick the ball off the pitch into the long grass. That cannot be allowed to happen because it has happened too long. I saw something this week. The first time I criticised Church of England Archbishop's Council safeguarding was 2005. I didn't realise it. I was looking up news coverage of there's a case, the 9 o'clock service in Sheffield. Chris Brain has been charged. I'm not going to go into details. He's been charged. But I started researching that and I found a news article quoting me, criticising the secrecy of the Archbishop's Council and the fact that they're putting reputation of the church above victim support. That's 2005. We're 20 years on near enough, and I'm making exactly the same arguments. We've got to stop kicking the ball into the long grass. We've got to pick up the ball and we've got to deal with it. And so the various amendments I'm not sure how they're going to be marshalled and tabled, but Synod needs to claim this back and say to the Archbishop's Council, you've been found wanting time and time again. You can't run with this anymore. You have been the problem. We now need to find the solution. And the solution isn't to carry on with the people who are causing the problem.
I know you shouldn't advertise on YouTube, but there is an amendment which is referred to by a number of people as the Drake Amendment, which I have put in with input from Gavin and from other people, which will change the entire motion to say, not being done by you lot, bring in the J report, implement it now. Because all they're going to, either this is going to go back and is going to say, we're going to do what Jay has said, or it's going to be all tweaked and removed. So we've had, say it again, a brilliant legal mind, an excellent academic mind with massive experience of abuse issues in churches who've given us their opinion. Why do we have to say, oh, I don't know about that opinion? Why don't we just say, thank you for your wisdom and your recommendations? We'll go and do it. And, if we do find it doesn't quite work, we'll make it work from there. But thank you for what you've given us, because the experts have spoken. We've had a conversation about ophthalmologists.
Oh, yeah, yes, okay, yes. But before I do that, just as you said that, Clive, I've just had a thought. Baroness Moan, Paula Venables, when challenged, saying, we just followed the legal advice. Well, why don't we just follow the legal advice? On this question of the response group, the way I've formulated it, we were talking and it suddenly came to me. I said, it's a bit like if you're going for an operation on your eye and the surgeon botches the job and leaves you blind in one eye and says, now I'd like to do the other one. Would you trust him? He said, no, I've learned all the lessons. I'm going to do it. Would you buy that surgeon? Would you honestly?
Yeah.
That's effectively what we're being asked to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's something we brought up in Wilkinson files, which is if the captain of the Titanic went back to White Star Line and said, oh, I'm really sorry about the iceberg. Give me another ship and I'll just try again. And I'm sure I won't hit the iceberg this time. we talk in the Wilkinson files about pilot error. And if you say it's pilot error, you very rarely let the same pilot have another 747 a few days later to try again. And I'm sure people have learned from all the things that have gone wrong, but maybe it's time to try a different approach rather than, I forget who it is says the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing time and again and hoping for a different result. But this is what worried Martin and me a lot about this. Can we throw this to the floor though, please, as well? Because we don't have a lot of time in this part of the meeting. If anyone would like to come and say anything at all on or off camera, you're most welcome to do so.
No.
Robert, otherwise the world can't hear
But
you.
it's not.
If you want to be on camera, stand there. Otherwise, stand there.
It's really a question. I wondered if you'd run through the different amendments because
well, it's slightly tricky because the paper hasn't been. I haven't seen the paper yet, and I do know that there. Well, I do know. I'm told that there are 10. I think 7 of them might be mine. But it really falls into two sides. The first thing, my amendments, first of all, is to hold the feet to the fire, and I'm asking them. I'm going to be very brutal, and I'm going to say, you must accept responsibility for everything that's gone wrong, as described in the Wilkinson report. I don't want any nonsense about it. You name it, and you take it, and it's going to hurt. Yeah. But then we go on. I then say, I want an apology, not only to the survivors, which they have expressed. We have to give credit to it. How sincere, some people might argue, but there we are. But we ought to be apologising to all the members of the ISB. These were really solid professionals who were used to working in competent, well-regulated environments, and they got sucked into this clown show. And they've been spat out the other end with their reputations damaged, and they've also been hurt in this. And I think we ought to be giving them an apology. So you'll see that's in there. There's a few things of that character where we just try and, let's own it. But the crunch point is that to my knowledge, there are 3 models. Because we only had 48 hours, we didn't get a chance to discuss it with everybody. My original version was to say, instead of allowing this response team to be nominated by heaven knows who, under heaven knows what processes, and there are at least 3 of those that 3 people on that list that I wouldn't let anywhere near this. But do we have to take them as a job lot, or can we say we don't like this one? We're not going to vote on them. It's either take them all or leave them. This is profoundly irresponsible, and it disrespects Synod. It's the old culture reasserting itself. Dear, don't worry. Don't worry. We've got it sorted. We've learned our lessons. You don't have to get involved in this. Trust us. We are the Church of England. So that.
Can you come and talk here, please?
No,
Otherwise we can't hear.
Well, we're asked who chose. The answer is we don't know. We ask them. It will be a robust process. I promise you that. Yes, okay. Now the other version is Clive's, which Clive has explained, which is that we get it out for to an independent consultancy to deal with this, and that's got a lot of power. But in fairness, Peter Adams has put in an amendment. He also put his mind to it, and he came up with a slightly halfway house, saying, "Well, let's certain people elect and certain people elect, and try and get a group together," which is in the same direction, but I think allows more influence for the church. But it might be better than mine. I'm not sure it's as good as Gavin's. I don't think it is. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to possibly take Gavin's, then Peter's, then mine. But to be fair, I'm not going to criticise the management. It's quite a tricky job to do it, and we've had so little time to liaise. So let's be a little gentle on them if they get that bit wrong. But if you think it's wrong, do challenge it. If you think there's a better way of doing it, please have the courage of your convictions. Because as so often, your gut feeling is going to be more reliable than their past practice. So I hope you feel empowered. This is what the Wilkinson files were about, to give you the facts, to give you confidence. You see, a number of you have come today. Flex your muscles. Say, not in my name. That's what we need to be doing.
Can I jump in very quickly? I know we're running out of time, but I just want to draw the Synod members particularly attention to the cost of all this. We've spoken about the cost of survivors, and that's the most important thing, but also there's a cost to the church. Question 156, which should come to today, talks about the cost of the reviews that are ongoing. The Wilkinson report cost £250,000, £250,000, to review the decision to disband the ISB. Professor Jay's report cost, and this isn't listed as final costs, £730,000. Now, that's not a fee to Professor Jay, that's all her costs, and there was extensive legal paper produced alongside her report. £730,000. The cost the finance notice paper tells you that the cost of implementing the resolution, the motion that the Archbishop's Council are putting forward for this review group is £300,000. So if the Archbishop's Council's motion goes ahead, that is £300,000 being spent on a group to do work that has already been done. I just want Synod members to be aware of that.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. That's a really good reminder. I know I was a lawyer, but I don't mind them spending money on that Bates-Wells report because, you know, I always say good advice saves you money, but it only saves you money if you follow it and you implement it well. We could well be having arguments into July or even November or February as to how this is being implemented, and that's the nightmare solution. We need to see things moved on, and we can do that by implementing the Wilkinson report and the Jay report.
As we're now coming up to the time for the Fringe meeting to end, just to tell you that this meeting is going to go on, and you can probably see there are people now waiting to join us from the waiting room who were invited to the second half, because the second half is not being hosted as a Fringe meeting. And in a few minutes' time, we're going to be joined by Jasvinda Sangera, Steve Reeves and Martin Percy, who are going to join in the discussion, which will continue for about another 45 minutes. You can watch it on YouTube. I will sit here until they turn the lights off on me. But officially, this is the end of the Fringe part of the meeting. Thank you so much for getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and thank you to everybody who we know has joined us from breakfast rooms and bedrooms everywhere. Thank you very much. We think there's a couple of members of the press have been joining us this morning as well, so thank you. You've heard what Synod members have said. This is all going to be online, so you can watch it again later to remind yourself what was said. And thank you so much for coming this morning, and thank you for your feedback as well. Just to let you know, we don't monetize the Wilkinson files in any way whatsoever. So if any adverts turn up on them, it's nothing to do with us. And we've given the press freedom to take anything they like out of the Wilkinson files. And there is going to be a 7th one. And we've now been approached to ask if we'll do the J files. So,
and can I just say, Clive, the technicalities of this have been brilliant. Well done, Clive.
So Jane, don't go. Gavin, please don't go. Dave, please don't go. You can all go, or you can stay as you wish, because I'm now going to hand over control to somebody else, and we're just going to become an audience for this while we watch it. So I'm just about to let in the people waiting in the waiting room, and then we will continue. But thank you all very much indeed for coming. And here we go for the second half. Yeah. So at the moment, good morning to Martin Percy down on the bottom left, and that logo is Steve Reeves, who is probably not aware we've just let him in. Steve, we've let you in. So he'll join us in a minute or two. Now, I'm hoping, and here comes Jasvinder.
Do we need to change it? It's a fringe meeting. Do you need to change it?
Yes, I will. Just going to change the title. All right. Use me a minute.
Can we actually start talking?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, yes, I wondered, Jasvinder and Steve, Jasvinder, you've been watching. How have you found what you've been seeing of our fringe meeting so far? Do you have any initial thoughts on that? I'll ask all our newcomers.
You're muted, Jazz.
Thank you. I've literally just joined, I'm afraid, but what I will say is the Wilkinson files, the way they have been disseminated for people to understand them has been really, really helpful. As you know, myself and Steve chose not to take part because the terms of reference were not informed by us. We were never consulted on the terms of reference. So in effect, this is the Church of England marking their own homework from my perspective anyway. You know, the key thing here is that today, as we stand here in February 2024, those victims and survivors that we were engaging with at the time of being on the ISB are still in the same place. You know, they still have not had their reviews progressed, and support for them is very ad hoc. And this is despite all 11 of them advocating this very clearly to Archbishop's Council, including, as we know, David Glasgow's report. So I find it wholly irresponsible, and I don't know who's been held to account for the fact that they know these victims and survivors are being impacted daily in their lives, you know, psychologically, mentally, and yet they are doing nothing about it. And this is wholly unacceptable. And myself and Steve have tried to advocate for victim survivors in the past, and it seems to me that it falls on deaf ears, and that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Steve will be coming in soon. So Martin, would you like to just come in at this point?
Absolutely. I mean, I completely echo what Jasvinder says. I don't know all of the ISB, but I do know a number of them. I know for a fact that they have no support from Kevin Crompton, despite that statement to General Synod coming out. They have no support from the Archbishop's Council. Synod is being told something different. I did listen to the presentation that just went on. I think it was outstanding. I'm just not really sure that Synod actually understands the sheer scale in which you are being misled, deceived, constantly lied to about what is going on, who is in charge, how much money is being spent, and what is the reality of the situations in safeguarding. I often use the word corrupt about this, and I'm afraid it is. You've heard from Gavin how much money the lawyers are trousering in all of this. The lawyers also turn on the victims and turn on the falsely accused as well. They are making an enormous amount of money out of this. They are wired into Lambeth Palace, 8 different dioceses in the Church of England, and many others as well. This is as bad as the Post Office, possibly worse. And I have to say, I think it is a national disgrace, the way this is being led. Even today, the agenda has been set so you get to approve the response group, all of whom got total conflicts of interest. I mean, you know, there's no question about that. They have safeguarding complaints against them, and yet they're being put up to run this response group. I mean, this is not marking your own homework. This is high levels of corruption. And I just think you're going to have to call it out.
Martin, I just think it's quite important that we differentiate who you're referring to when you talk about the lawyers. I know I was one.
Okay.
Still technically am. But I do think we have to say that Bates Wells, who are the lawyers who advise Professor Jay, they have just done a discrete piece of work under the instruction from Professor Jay. We're not including them in that list of those that
we're absolutely not including Bates Wells in that. No, we're talking about the lawyers that the church uses all the time, almost on tick. And there is millions and millions of pounds going every year, sometimes every month, to these folk. You've got no accountability, no scrutiny. Clive will confirm, the audit committee is not allowed to look into this. It's absolutely hopeless.
Okay, Steve, are you able to join us now?
Steve, according to this, you're muted. I think it's a connection problem at your end. I'm afraid. I'm so sorry. No. Anybody else then?
Well, while you're waiting for Steve, I must just I will have to go in about 20 minutes because I've got to go and give a lecture somewhere up near York. But I'm very happy to participate for the next 20 minutes as much as I can, really. You might all be in shock by then anyway. Jasvinder, do you want to say any more about, in a sense, I guess, the ways in which the ISB 12 have just been, kicked around like collateral, actually?
Yeah, sure. Just to say, Steve's having problems getting in. He's texted me, so he has been trying to get in. He's listening, just so you know. Yes. Yeah, I mean, even when I look at us, myself and Steve, and the work that we were doing at the time, and the whole lack of objectivity from Archbishop's Council in relation to imposing a chair on us. We were doing the work we were doing, and then all of a sudden we're sacked. And a week before Synod, we were ready to speak there. I'm not going over our brand, but the point here is the behaviour lacks transparency and accountability. That's the point I want to make. And as the survivor advocate at the time, and somebody who's remained in touch with all the 11, I am listening to people in despair, and it's just people are not listening. I've emailed Stephen Cottrell and Justin Welby at 3 a.m. in the morning saying, my conscience does not allow me to sleep. Please, will you listen to the pain that these 11 are going through? And, nothing. It's just not acceptable, and it needs to be shouted loud and clear. These 11 say to me, does one of us have to die for somebody to listen?
You mentioned the oft-repeated words, which I certainly adopt, of transparency and accountability. But as I've been listening to you, I think there's another word I think we need to bring into the conversation about how these people have been treated, and that is the lack of empathy.
Yeah.
Do you see any empathy from the Archbishop's Council members at all towards exactly how much pain they are causing?
I absolutely don't, no, because the 11 could not have been clearer. They have written several letters to Archbishop's Council expressing their pain, expressing the need for the reviews to move forward. They even instructed and sought the support of a clinical psychologist, a professor in this field, to demonstrate to them. And the thing here is, the 11 have still not had a response to David Glasgow's report. In that report, he is very clear that these victims and survivors have had damage caused to them, equivalent to the fact that some of them experienced suicidal ideation. Now, if you don't hear that from a professional like a clinical psychologist, what does it take?
Exactly. I really do echo this. I think it gets even worse, though, doesn't it? I think if any of those victims actually push and press and pester Archbishop's Council, they get told that that's harassment, so they get shut out. There's nowhere to complain to. pretty well everybody that you do get through to says, oh, it's not our responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the NST to respond to this, or the NSP, or the NSGG, or whatever it would be. It's nobody's job, apparently. But what Synod will hear is, of course, that everything's being taken very seriously. Lessons are being learned. They must do better, and victims are front and centre of the concerns of the archbishops and the Archbishops' Council. This is not true. The uniform experience of victims and those who have been let down by the Archbishops' Council and the NST is that they do not care, and they want them to go away.
Martin, can I just reflect back to you, because I know where that's come from. You say about people say it's not my job. The Wilkinson report actually quotes Graham, who's one of the survivors, not one of the ISP 12, I think, and he said that is a major problem. That everybody said it's not my job and passes it on, and that's in the Wilkinson report. It's not just you saying that. Right. Is it?
No, it's not, and it is just the uniform experience, I'm afraid, of all the victims. They don't want to handle this, and of course, then you get the double speak. It's very Orwellian from 1984. We can't mark our own homework. We have to have independence. The first time you get something that cogently recommends independence, it's immediately snatched back into a response group that has no accountability, no transparency. You don't even know how these people were appointed. And you know where this is going. The response group will take 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months, and they will kick the can down the road. They're not serious about independence. They're not honest. You cannot trust them.
Yes. I remember in a totally different context, nothing to do with safeguarding, one of the Synod members, Andrew Dotchin, once gave the very striking phrase, when you give, let go. And I love that idea, and I think that's kind of relevant. But Steve, I think we might have you back on the screen. Are you there? Oh no, is he muted? He's muted.
Well, he cut off again. We had Steve with us for a brief second.
Oh dear.
And then it cut him off again. I have paid the bill, I assure you.
Well, can I just throw it out to perhaps Gavin? Would you like to expand on any of this that you would like to do, or Dave?
Well, the Steve Reeves box is just unmuted, so Steve's now with us again.
Steve, are you there?
I don't know whether you can hear me now.
We can.
Yes, we can.
It's terribly regretful that you can't see me on a Saturday morning at this time. I'm sorry. I don't quite know what's happened. I've got about 3 devices here, all trying to log in at the same time. So apologies. Just a few comments from me, perhaps before I turn into a pumpkin again and the technology destroys me, maybe. I agree with much of what's been said. I think Wilkinson Files is a great piece of work in trying to bring some complex issues to the understanding of people who are way too busy to wade through hundreds and hundreds of pages of dense text. The points that both Jane and Jasvinder have made really about the plight of survivors involved in this process is really profound, and I would sort of make that point about our participation with Wilkinson and the steps that were taken to disband the ISB. Our first go-to was around supporting survivors and ensuring survivors had what they needed. And I would like to think that that is because Jasvinder and I are inspired and unique safeguarding professionals. That isn't the case. That is the standard response to people who work in this space. And so I would just like to emphasize the fact that, you know, when you look at Wilkinson and Jay, we are not talking about minor issues with an institution that just needs to make a few tweaks. The church is a significant outlier in the way it does much of this work, particularly at the national level. You know, it is not an area where tweaks and minor amendments and the folks who got you into this mess can get you out of it now that they've learned some lessons and had some things pointed out to them. The church is a significant outlier. Their response is not normal, and actually it needs to be normalized with the rest of the world as soon as possible.
Yes. That's possibly a phrase that somebody might like to pick up and use in the debate, that the church is a significant outlier in how it deals with safeguarding.
May I just add to this? I mean, I think Steve makes an absolutely, excellent point. I mean, most people, I imagine, in the room in Synod will have been watching the great post office scandal, or will have heard the podcast, may have read the book. The Church of England here, with the NST and the Archbishop's Council, is, in respect of safeguarding, the complainant, the investigator, the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, and the jailer all at once. And nobody in any of this has any idea or any accountability as to where they go. And if you are appalled by the way the post office handled its postmasters and postmistresses, well, any victim or anybody falsely accused is being treated on a daily basis identically by the people you will be sharing a room with later today. That's what Steve is effectively saying here. The Church of England is an outlier. It doesn't want scrutiny. It doesn't want accountability. It simply wants to get on with its own thing and avoid any scrutiny or accountability. Now, until that changes, this will be an almighty mess, and the injustice will continue for years to come. You have to stop it.
And if anybody is still in any doubt about what Martin has just said about them not wanting scrutiny, the order paper for today's business has just dropped. And I'm not going to go through the order of the amendments. As Martin said, it's a complicated business, and they seem to have done a decent job in trying to make sense of them. But alongside that is a new notice paper 9, which is a financial statement on the amendments. Now, the interesting thing here, in relation to the Clive's amendment, it says that they've got no experience of getting external legislative counsel, so they don't know how much it will be, but they reckon it will be in the region of between £50,000 and £100,000, and final costs dependent. And they have no brief on they've got no experience of external consultants. It would depend on the brief as to how much it would cost. But then it says this, and this is where it comes to the manipulation of Synod members.
Yep.
They say, however, as can be seen in the answer to question 156 on the comparative costs of making Wilkinson and J, this is what I mentioned earlier, such costs can run to several hundred thousands of pounds. And if this motion is passed, any resulting costs would be an unbudgeted cost for the Archbishop's Council to bear from its reserves, reducing, stopping, or delaying other work or seeking additional funding. Those wordings do not appear on the original financial paper, where it says that their review group that they're proposing is going to cost £300,000 from unbudgeted funds. It says it's an additional cost on the Archbishop's Council, but it doesn't underline the fact that that £300 will also be an unbudgeted cost to bear from its reserves, reducing, stopping, or delaying other work or seeking additional funding. The Archbishop's Council are continuing, even today, to manipulate Synod, to mislead, to lie, and to try and control what goes on.
Absolutely correct.
Gavin, I wonder if you could encapsulate that in an email, and perhaps we could get that to some people, because that's a really important point. But of course, Clive and I and one or two here, we're going to be booked to say other things, so we're going to have to find somebody to do that. You've got Synod members' emails, I suspect. It may be that you could drop it to some people that you know that to make sure they.
I've got some, but please draw people's attention to, as you have done previously, to churchabuse.uk, because this will be on there within an hour of this session finishing.
Okay,
I think Steve wants to come in. I must go shortly, but I think I just want to say to Synod members who are watching, you're being given a presentation effectively by the same mentality and language that ran the post office over the Horizon scheme over a 15-year period, 20-year period. It's the same. It's manipulation. It's doublespeak. It's constant lies, kicking the can down the road. It is as corrupt and deliberate as that. There's no question of this. And it's there in the finances. It's there in the accountability. It's just deceit after deceit after deceit, layer after layer after layer. And you can't even, on the floor of Synod, get to this, because the agenda is so controlled and the power so total. I don't know what you do to get it out of their hands. I think you're going to have to protest. I think you're going to have to really roll your sleeves up and actually start to get serious. But you're watching corruption in slow motion.
I think we're coming very close to having to close in a minute or two. Gavin, thank you for those comments. As an auditor, I noted those with great interest, and they will turn up somewhere in my speech this morning. Anyone on the call, really, before we close to the public, is there anything you'd like to add at the end of this as we go to prepare for a day of debate about this topic, and no doubt a lot of discussion over the weekend? Dave Wilkinson.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious to anybody who's watched through this. On a lot of this, I'm way out of my depth. I know I am. But in terms of survivors who no longer feel safe in a church, they're being left to find a place of worship on their own. The Church of England has caused the situation. You can't ask those people to go back into another Church of England church. It's like saying to a parent whose child was abused in a nursery, send the kid back to that nursery. Okay, you've had your legal settlement, but in terms of where the child has to go, they're going back to that same nursery. And it's being left to people like the Ordinary Office to pick up the pieces and provide a worship space for which I am not qualified, I'm out of my depth, I'm not resourced, and there are other groups trying to do the same. The Church of England's responsibility is to provide that safe place that's independent of the Church of England for survivors.
Somebody else who wants to come in?
Wonder, there are a couple of points, Clive, but I'll try to be very brief because I'm conscious of your time. This point about resourcing is really important. Jay makes reference to this as well. What we see virtually everywhere else is the provision of resource restricts poor practice. So actually what happens is in many organizations, poor practice is stopped because we can't keep throwing good money after bad. What we see in the church setting with the Archbishop's Council is their willingness to spend extraordinary amounts of money on things that are proven not to have worked. And that is remarkable. And it is only an organization with very significant resource that can keep pressing this relatively dogmatic approach. And so I would be really wary if I were a member of Synod on any sort of obstacle, any suggestion that things need to be delayed or amended on the basis of cost. Archbishop's Council can find extraordinary amounts of money for things they care about. And actually, if they can't find extraordinary amounts of money for safeguarding, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, well, maybe this isn't something they care sufficiently about. The last point I guess I would make is there is a way of doing this. The church is an outlier. Its response is not normal. Other people do this dramatically better, particularly in terms of their work with survivors, than the church. Be really wary of people who tell you that the people who are doing better than the church somehow don't understand in the way the church do, or that the church has got some unique aspects to it that means that the things that work everywhere else wouldn't work here. Be really wary of the folks who got you into this mess, who are telling you that the people who've succeeded elsewhere don't know what they're doing.
Thank you for that. Jane, I think you wanted to come in.
Well, just the thing about money, I think, you know, I have absolutely no sympathy with any debate really about the cost for safeguarding when we can spend 23.5 million on doing up Lambeth Palace Library. You know, surely the cost of safeguarding children and vulnerable adults within the church is more important than Lambeth Palace Library. So I have absolutely no patience with that as an area of difficulty or an obstacle to good safeguarding practice. And the other thing my final request would be that we do ensure that survivors' voices are part of the process, whatever process Synod agrees to, that survivors' voices are key in that. I asked to speak at the debate today, and that was refused for a reason which I don't think was you know, particularly valid. Basically, that they couldn't fairly choose among survivors, so they couldn't allow any. How is that a valid reason? So I've got to go soon as well, because I'm going to come and observe from the public gallery. But I think that that's one area where Jay was perhaps a little, didn't have time to give that full attention, in terms of how survivors should be fully engaged and have real authority in the process of implementing the J review, and in the organisations that are set up. There should be survivors on the boards, and I hope that's something that Synod will push for as well.
Thank you, Jane, very much indeed. Jazz, you had your hand up. Did you want to come in with the last word?
Just very quickly, the Wilkinson report does not dispute the fact that I was told by a very senior member, the most senior member of the NST, that I was too survivor focused. What he says is I took it out of context, but the point here is, to be accused of being too survivor focused says it all for me. And we have to really start with victims and survivors. I've been supporting victims and survivors for 3 decades of my life, and I have never come across an organisation that lacks empathy and lacks understanding when it comes to victims and survivors.
Thank you. I think we're coming towards the close. Gavin's got his hand up though. Please, Gavin.
Thank you. 2 very quick points. Firstly, I was reminded in the conversation of the words of the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, a few years back, when he said about safeguarding, to do it right will cost a lot of money. To do it badly will cost our souls. I've misquoted him. I haven't got the exact words, but that is in summary what he said, those 2 sentences, and that needs to be reminded to people today. But secondly, just to the people listening, we've talked about money, we've talked about structures, we've talked about bodies, we've talked about governance, we've talked about things. And people, well, what does all this matter? It matters because what we're talking about is people. And we're talking about people, and it's those structures and the money and the bodies enable the church, any organisation, to treat people well. Victims, survivors, the accused, families. This is about people, and to put people first means we have to have the structures in place to be able to do that. So it's not a dry conversation about whether this structure or that structure or another structure. It's about how we treat people, and I just wanted to underline that at the end, so that to ground the conversation, not about bodies and structures, but about people.
Thank you. Anyone else want to have any last words? I shall hand back to Martin Steele to close us.
Well, I think we simply close by thanking all of you who've come in and have contributed, not only this morning, but on many occasions in the past. It's been a long struggle. There's no guarantee we're going to get anywhere today, but we're damn well going to try.
So at this point, we're about to continue the YouTube broadcast, and thank everybody who's joined us today. We wish Martin Percy a safe journey down to York, and that'll be an interesting lecture. Tickets available, Martin, or you can plug it if you wish.
I'll be talking about the post office of prayer. Thank you.
Thank you all, and also big thanks to David Lucas this morning, who's been my shadow technically to make sure we wouldn't be disconnected. And David, thank you very much indeed. Jane, we're looking forward to seeing you later today. We'll give you a wave, and we'll find you a cup of coffee somewhere along the way. Jazz and Steve, I know you're having to run over all old ground, and it's awful to have to do this, because as I described you as victims of abuse, and I haven't changed my opinion on that since I said it. So thank you both for your courage to continue to talk about this. And Gavin, thank you for having very quickly analysed what me change my speech for my proposed amendment. So I'll have to roll. We can't roll credits, unfortunately, during the speech at Synod. I've asked Synod support, and they can't give me a screen underneath my paragraph numbers, and they can't let us roll credits either. But thank you all very much indeed. For people watching on YouTube, thank you for your patience in joining us this morning. You can watch this all again later if you wish to, and keep a watch out on the sheepfold project, because we said we've been pressed to do the J files, as well as we know we have to do Wilkinson, the follow-up, which we will do. And thank you for your continuing interest, because without your interest, things will just slide through, and we need people to be watching this closely and to hold us all to account all the time. So thank you for doing that. And thank you, everybody who's on screen. Thank you. Goodbye. Don't applaud, throw money.
Thank you, Clive and Martin, particularly for all your work.
Absolutely.
And Dave, thank you all for all the work that put this together.
Yeah, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're now going to turn off the broadcast somewhere. I'll find it.
Thanks, Jazz. See you later.